guys, it's Sam, and today I'm going to rank all of the couples I read about in 2020. So these are my least favorite all the way up to my favorite couples. I've done these videos every year and they're fairly popular, so I know you guys were wondering when this one was coming. And I'm choosing to stand up this time, and that's a choice because I have 76, I believe, like books and couples to talk about. And this year I made this easier on myself because I kept it in my reading spreadsheet. So I'm not necessarily going to show you it, but I will be looking over here to go over everything because I wrote down as I was reading the book title, the characters' names, a little blurb about how I felt about it right after I finished reading them, and then ranking on the side, which then I was able to sort just now and rank by like little section and everything, and it worked out really well. Very happy with myself for doing that. So here is the tier ranking system that I have that I'm going to be going through. So we're going to start with my least favorite, the all capital letters loathe. And there are 3 of those. Then we're going into the nays, the nopes. There are 14 of those. Then we get very particular. We have the nay slash meh. There's only 1 of those. And then we go into the meh. So just like very neutral. I'm just kind of like, I don't feel really anything about them. And there's 14 of those. Then we go into the yay slash meh. So like I'm a little bit more positive feeling, but still eh. There's also 14 of those. And then the yays, which are like, I love them, I ship it, but like, they're not like OTPs. Like I don't like think about them all the time, but I have positive thoughts for them. Those are my yays at 22. And then I have 6 all capital letters loves, which probably won't surprise you if you've watched my favorite books of the year. So as this is a couples video, there might be spoilers. If you don't want any kinds of spoilers at all, potentially, I don't really know how in detail I'm going to go here, but I'm not going to necessarily hold back from things. So if you are at all afraid about hearing couple spoilers, don't watch this. But I shouldn't be going in too much depth with a lot of these because I don't have time. Like there's like 76 books to go through. So let's get into it. First, the most hated of all of the ships was America, Maxon, and Aspen from the Selection by Kira cast. This is something we read for a Household Book Club this year. And I'm actually going to read off some of the little blurbs that I wrote for some of these because they're funny, like what my initial reaction was. All I said in this was, all caps, no one has a personality, and Maxon smells like chemicals. Because there's a line, I remember very little about this book, but I do remember there being a line where America says that Maxon smells like some kind of like chemical, or he just smells like chemicals, and I'm like, that is worse than saying he smells like sunshine and, you know, sandalwood. Like, what is that? No one has a personality. I can't remember. This is so like early 2010s YA. Awful. Garbage. But yeah, this was, they were all awful. Then we have Kala and Jonah from The Simple Wild. This is a adult contemporary romance where she goes to Alaska because her dad is passing away, and she meets this guy. He's the one that actually is like flying her over there and stuff, and he's friends with her dad, and he's an asshole. Like he's an asshole from the beginning, and it's sort of said that they're like enemies to lovers and whatever, but he's like super awful for like most of the book, and I just don't dig it. He steals her luggage, he makes fun of her relentlessly, he makes fun of her not using normal milk in her coffee, but she's lactose intolerant, and he doesn't know that, but he also like, what is the point of making fun of someone for that? And like, it's always like, you look better without makeup, and it's just like a huge like, it's almost like those pickup artists that were really popular in like, again, I think early 2010s where like negging was a thing. Like you want to insult a woman to make her like you more. Like it was just, it wasn't banter. It was just like, he's an asshole. For what? For no reason. So didn't dig them. Then we have Snow and Lucy Gray from A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, also in the loathe it category. This I wrote that I was forced to read a romance between a villain and a tribute, and it was gross. He was possessive of her, she had no agency. I get that that was probably part of like the whole point, but like, don't make us like read him like trying to convince us that he loves her. Like it was just, no, so many things about this book were awful, but like the shoehorned in love story was like also awful. It just, no. Then we get into the like nay category. I still don't like it. I'm still gonna bitch a lot about these books, but like I don't like hate them that much. I mean, I still don't like them, but we'll get into it. We have Guinevere, Mordred, and Arthur from the Guinevere Deception. I don't feel like anything about any of these characters. The main character really like has like no personality, and I don't remember really much of anything about any of them, and it feels just like very immature. Like she has a very immature personality. I know that YA is like, they're supposed to be young, but she just reads like very young YA, and it just felt like an early YA love triangle kind of thing, which was really weird to read in 2020 because I'm like, aren't we done with this? So yeah, these guys, no, don't care, which is why I won't be continuing with the series. There is like a definitely like romance major plot in this, and I'm like, no, I want nothing to do with that. Then we have Zara and Leon from Someday in Paris. This is a adult romance. It's actually historical. These two meet when they are like children, and they are locked in like a museum or something, and the lights go off and they don't really get to see each other, but they have this like bond. And then the whole story is them just like sort of not quite meeting, not quite crossing paths, but they have this like magical soulmate bond. It's not a fantasy, but they have this like this speculative element of this like they're soulmates. So you spend the whole book like waiting for them to get together, and like they do at some point, I think, but it's just like for them having this magical soulmate bond that you're like waiting for, there's like none of it together. And it's possible, and this is why I said the whole spoiler thing, it's possible that like one of them dies shortly after they get together or something like that. I feel like I didn't put it in my note, and it's been a little bit since I read it and I like removed it from my brain, but it's just like why? So yeah, this one made me mad. Then we have Joven and Hadria from City of Lies, and these two were just poorly developed and like really rushed. The note that I wrote is that these two have sex in the middle of a siege underground when they think that everyone that's above them in the siege is possibly dying, like all of their loved ones. It's really bizarre. Like there's this weird dynamic where she kind of like hates him and his like people, I think, from what I'm remembering, because this is one of the first books I feel like I read this year. And then they're in this siege and there starts being like chemistry, and then they just have sex. No, I don't remember anything besides this siege sex that they were having, which people do have sex in a siege. That is like a proven thing that happens. This just didn't make any sense. Then we have Oliver and Nora from Winterwood. I remember like nothing about this book, about these two. I remember this book just being like very mediocre. Apparently, according to my notes, it's insta-love, and she like falls in love with the dead boy and then uses a power she didn't know she had to save him. I don't remember that. You know, but it must have obviously like not, I mean, it was insta-love, it wasn't good for me. So yeah, didn't love it. Oh, that's right. They find him in the woods, but he's actually dead because the woods like finds people. And then she has, I don't remember the power thing, because I do remember that, like, this not being explained power-wise. And then, yeah, like, she must have, like, brought him back from the dead, maybe? Because she, like, finds things? I don't remember, but it was still, like, yeah, it was not great. Then we have Win and Carly from Kiss Me Every Day. This is a adult female-female romance in which the main character is in a time loop. I read a couple of time loops this year. And she's actually always really been sort of, like, in love with her sister's now wife. But she actually met this woman first, didn't really go for her, and the sister kind of went for her really hard, and so she ended up with a sister. But now in like present day, the sister and the wife are like breaking up because the sister kind of treats her bad and like they're not a good match. So somehow the main character Win like goes back in time and sort of has to relive the day that she met this woman and try to like work everything out. And I didn't mind the first half. Like the first half of them sort of like getting to know each other and Win trying to like do things differently in her life as well. It isn't just about the romance, is like fine. But then the time loop got like so repetitive, and then they also got to a point where it was like ugh, because at one point in the time loop like they have sex, but then the time loop like restarts. So like Win has all of these experiences with this woman that she doesn't have with her, but then at like the very end, once the time loops are like about to end or whatever, it's the conclusion of the book, there's this confession of the time loops, which is just like, it never really works very well. And then these mutual confessions of love that don't make sense because Win has reason to love her, but the other girl like hasn't really spent time with her in that way, and it just is like very extreme and over the top. So I wanted to love this because I was like, female romance, it's like a second chance thing. Time loops can work, I guess. But this was the year that I was kind of like, maybe I don't like time loops. So didn't love this because it was just like overdone. Then we have Wade and Elliot from A Thousand Letters, and this is a persuasion retelling, and I do like persuasion retellings because they're just like baked in angst. And this book was like not my favorite. I remember rating it 2 stars, but I do still think about it a little bit, and like it did like hurt me, you know, like the hurting in my bones that I get sometimes when I feel for a couple. However, he was kind of like awful to her. So they were together as like teenagers. They were gonna get married, and then he joined the army without telling her and was like, either we need to get married right now so that you come with me. And she's like, I don't leave my family. And he was like really mad at her for that. And so then when he came back, his dad's dying and she's like really close with their family, and he's like shunning her and being like really awful. and then like just kind of being like, wow, you were awful for doing that to me and whatever, when she really wasn't. And then his dad dies at some point in the book, and he like comes over to her house and like sleeps with her, but then like leaves again, and it's just like a lot, and she just forgives him for that in the end. And I'm just like, he was like, without a conversation, and it's like, he was like really mean to you. Like, I get his feelings were hurt, but like, that wasn't appropriate. So although I love me some like persuasion angst, this didn't hit the way it should have. Then we have Ash and Maddock from Set Fire to the Gods, and all I wrote on here was just typical YA bullshit. Like, I'm pretty sure this was a dual perspective, and the two characters ended up like being like, ooh, who's that? Ooh, who's that? And then they just like each other. No, like it was just early 2010s YA, man. Like, we can't be doing that a decade later. It's no, the time has passed. Then we have Danny and David plus Danny and kind of Aaron from In 5 Years. This is not a romance book. This is just an adult contemporary, but it was portrayed as a romance book, and this is like not really romance. So I kind of that's why I put in my notes, I was like, it's not really romance, so like, nah, no. Because you don't really like see the characters together much. The romance that you think is going to happen doesn't really happen in the way that you think it's going to happen, and it's just like, from what it was promising by the synopsis, and this was all like a marketing problem, you don't get that, so it's like very unsatisfying. Then we have Liv and Mac from Undercover Bromance, which is the second book in the Bromance book club, an adult contemporary romance series. And these two, like, so Mac is one of the main guys in the Bromance book club, and the Bromance book club, which I'll talk about the first book later, basically it's a bunch of guys that read romance novels to be like better partners and more like emotionally present and like aware and stuff. And Mac is one of the main guys, and Liv is the sister of the girl in the first book who was like, you really don't like her in the first book, and I thought maybe the second book I would like her more. No. I just really found that there wasn't much substance to either of their arcs individually. I didn't like her, and then I didn't really feel anything for like either of them. And this book, I've talked about a little bit before, that it gets so muddled it turns into plot soup. Like, the author tries to add in so many different issues into this book, but it was just too much, not enough focus on the couple, but also I didn't really like the couple. So it was overall just meh. This is still in the nay category, but it was just like bad meh. Then we have Naledi and Thabizo from A Princess in Theory, and these are at the nay category, but almost to the meh category, because I didn't like really viscerally hate them. The problem was just like the writing for me personally, and I know a lot of people love Alyssa Cole, and I do plan on reading more Alyssa Cole, but I always say with romance books, I'm very okay, like I'm getting very okay with like sex scenes now, but if the book is very sexual like all the way through, not even with like erotica, but just like where the characters think about each other in sexual ways like all the time, I just like don't like that. I'm like, can you think about each other in like other ways than sexual? Like, you can think about each other that way, but also like maybe romantic more, and like just not about each other's bodies and like doing things with your tongues. So that was just a thing that turned me off about them. I think that they could have been like a great couple for me, and like in that way, and I don't like hate them, but it was just like the way that they think about each other, which I get happens, was just like, I don't want to read about that. So yeah, this one wasn't written in a way that I tend to like for couples. Now we're getting into the like kind of in between, almost to the meh category. We have two couples in here. One is like a for sure couple, and one is more of like, are they? And I want to talk about them kind of separately. The first is Fitz and Molly. Fitz and Molly are a horrible couple. They're not a good match. They are not compatible. And like reading throughout this whole series of Fitz like loving Molly, I'm just like, why? She's horrible for you. So like that sucks. But then we have Fitz and the Fool. So in this series, they're like not together. I don't know if they ever do get together. I don't know what the situation is with them. But there is this like interesting dynamic happening where like they're sort of drawn together, the Fool especially to Fitz, and they end up having this bond, this like magical bond starting in here. It's called a skill bond. And I don't know where that's gonna go. Like there are other, like at least I think 2 more series that just follow Fitz throughout the realm of the Elderlings, like overall series. So I'm not gonna get to that probably for a while of like them sort of being together, but I know there's a whole like Fitz and the Fool like trilogy. So I'm sure this is explored more, but I feel like that's shippable. So I put like that in the yay category, but it's also like not canonly together in here or anything. It's just kind of like potential. And then him and Molly, who are like the couple that are together in here, as don't like it. Then we have Rhea and Chloe from Seven Devils. This just didn't need a romance. Like at all. It's a female-female romance, love that, sure, but it's like so forgettable. I can't even really tell you why it's so meh, but I do kind of remember it being like, there doesn't need to be a romance in here. Like, they could have just been like friends. There didn't need to be a, like, I can't even remember anything about them, and it sucks because that's a female-female romance. Cool, awesome. Don't care. Then we have Travis and Georgie from Fix Her Up. All I wrote here is that this is basically a vanilla dom sub relationship. I think I talked about this in my wrap up for this book, but a lot of people were surprised I even read this because they're like, this is not going to be your jam. And sure, it is kind of like smutty at times, but the thing that was like so weird about this is there's like, it's a romance between a gal and her like brother's best friend, that they like knew each other growing up and she always had a crush on him, and it's just like really extreme. Like she is very like innocent and naive. She's a professional clown, which like just adds to that in a very dramatic way. And then he's like this, I think, baseball player, like playboy, like experienced. So there's all these like weird tropes in here that I don't like, as far as like he has like this like, she's a virgin, so he has this like virgin thing, like virgin kink, and like her innocence kink, and like just a lot of the stuff. And I just felt like they could have just made this like a full dom sub thing, which I wouldn't have read, but like if you're gonna do it, just go, because I feel like there's a lot of like this like daddy, like it was just like some of that I was like, this is right under the surface, and if you just go there and put that into that category, then you're probably going to get a better readership anyway, who like really want that, instead of people who are thinking this is just a contemporary romance and are getting something like a little more. So yeah, didn't love that. I just didn't like their dynamic, like don't really remember a whole ton about it, but it was just weird. Then we have Emma and Macalis, I think is his name. He's like I think he's a demon. This is meh. Just very meh, very forgettable. Supposed to almost be like an enemies to lovers thing, but it's just like a monster boyfriend story that if you're into monster boyfriends you might like this, but like very forgettable and not fleshed out at all. Then we have Ava and Akado from A River of Royal Blood. This is sort of like a very fast-paced enemies to lovers situation, and added nothing to the story. Like it didn't need to be in there at all. Like I really don't know why it was even in there. Like there's a little bit of like banter. That's totally not the point of the story. It added nothing to the story. Then we have Elena and Kieran from the Falconer series. These are two that I'm very neutral about. This is like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Fae, and he's a Fae and she's a human, like Slayer kind of person. And they have this thing that I should be really into as somebody who grew up on Buffy, who is in love with both Bangel and Spuffy, if you remember the ship names. So I should have been like totally all for this, and it just like, it didn't vibe with me. Like I just was very, like I didn't hate it, but I just was like, I don't care. Like this whole like, will they, won't they, like is it gonna work out for them? I'm like, it probably will. Like I don't know. So it didn't have the tension that I wanted it to have. Then we have Aidan and Orla from the 5-Year Plan. This is another adult contemporary romance. This is like a second chance romance and sort of a friends to lovers. So from what I'm remembering, these two met and had like a summer together when, I'm pretty sure this is the one about the wildlife photographer. So they had a summer together and then separated. Like she didn't go with him when he went traveling or whatever. So like they started out as friends, weren't gonna get together, got together and had like a month together, and then left. And then so we get that like flashback of them together, and then we get them like in modern times when they see each other again. So there were parts of this I really liked and parts I really didn't. So it is like a friends to lovers, like over a like, you know, whirlwind summer kind of thing, and then second chance when they like meet back up again. But there were some things about him that like, although I was pulling for them at times, I was like, oh, then he did some things that I feel like were crossing boundaries. Like he never really took no for an answer with her, and like would always push her on her boundaries. Not necessarily like sexually, it wasn't like sexual boundaries, but just like she would be like, I don't want to do something, and he's like, no, we're gonna, and it's like, you're not listening to her. So I just like didn't dig that. And there was a lot of other like sort of red flag behaviors like that, and it annoyed me because he was always portrayed as like a nice guy in a story. So I'm like, if you're gonna portray him as a bad boy and he has those, like, it's still not great, but like whatever, but don't portray him as like a nice guy and then make him do that. Then we have Susan and Chris from All Stirred Up, which is another adult contemporary romance and another persuasion retelling. The problem with this is it was a persuasion retelling that didn't really focus on like them at all, and there was hardly any romance in it. I think it was only at like maybe the very end, and it was more about like her life and stuff, and I'm just like, I am not here to read about your life and your family. I'm here to read about you guys longing for each other across the room. Like there was not enough longing, not enough angst. Then we have another adult contemporary romance. This is Rick and Lana from Mistletoe or Mr. Right. And these two were just like cute, but whatever. Like I didn't really like them, like either of them a ton. I liked him a little bit more than her, and I got their dynamic because she's like a big city girl and he's like an Alaska guy that's like grungy kind of, and like that whole like opposites attract thing I totally get, but it was still like whatever. Also, the couples in these books like get together really easily, and I don't love like that. Like there's not enough like, oh, you guys just like each other and it's just fine. Okay. Then we have Ruby and Dove from The Rise and the Wicked. And this is a romance between a trans boy and a witch girl from a magical family. And I said in my notes, cute but shrug, and that is how I feel. I don't remember anything about them. Sure don't. Like, I vaguely remember their names. I'm pretty sure I read this in like September or October, I think, but I have no other recollection of them. Just, they must have been cute. Meh. Then we have Maisie and Andrew from In a Holidays. This is a adult contemporary romance that's set around Christmas, and this is another time loop story, and this was between two friends who were like friends from in childhood, and really their like families know each other. They're like family friends. They only see each other around Christmas, and it's almost like a second chance thing because she gets to relive this time loop to kind of like sort of get together with him, and it's fine. Like, I think the only reason I remember it is because I just read it in like right around Christmas, and it's like only a few weeks later now. So otherwise, if you would have asked me about this like a year from now, I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. I have very little recollection. Like, I kind of pulled for them. It was fine. No substance there. Then we have The Tourist Attraction. This is by the same author as Mistletoe and Mr. Right that I must have forgotten to put on the list. I'm just remembering now. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I read this book and like I must have not put on the list, which is really weird. But this is Zoe and Graham, and this is like a tourist who's like really sweet, meets a local in Alaska who's like a bar owner, and he's like an owner of a tourist attraction bar, and he like hates it, and he's grumpy, and she's kind of a ray of sunshine a little bit, and they fall for each other, but it's very drawn out. Like, these books are way too long. Like, and they get together, but like everyone knows they like each other, but they haven't figured it out yet, kind of. So it just is like very long. I wouldn't say it's angsty long. It's just like drawn out for no reason. So this is just kind of like, whatever, it's fine. I don't really ship it. Then we have Daisy and Billy and Karen and Graham from Daisy Jones and the Six. And these are two that like, I find these couples compelling, but as couples, I'm not like so set on them. I like Graham and Karen more than Daisy and Billy. I found Daisy and Billy super toxic. Just they're, I get it, and I get that's kind of the point. This is a adult novel about a fictional like rock band and their dynamics, and these are all bandmates, but they're just really like toxic people. And Billy and Daisy like so almost get like a second chance at the very end. You find out like that they're gonna like probably get a chance to be together, maybe, like probably, whatever. And it's just like, no, y'all were toxic and like messed up a lot of people's lives. Like, I can't with you. Like, I get that you were both having like addictions and what, but like, bleh. Karen and Graham on the other hand made me sad because they were like a side couple, and I don't talk about any other side couples in here really, but they were a side couple that was like pretty prominent, and they talk about each other like in the story. This is like a multiple POV kind of story, and told in like an interview style, and like the way they talk about each other just makes me like, like, I don't think they were super compatible, so it's fine, and they weren't supposed to be together, but I'm like, why didn't they get a chance to be together and not Billy and Daisy? Like, they were just like, I don't know, I feel like those crazy kids could have worked it out somehow, you know? So they're still in like that but almost getting to the yay, almost getting to the meh yay category. Then we have Kai and Maggie from Storm of Locusts, and the only reason they're really in the meh category, because I really like them in book one, is because they're not together in this book. Like, they're separated. We don't really know what the dynamics are, but they still like, Maggie's still sort of like thinking about him and kind of being like, what's going on, and is he okay, and whatever. So there's this like lingering, like they have a thing, have a connection, but they're not together. So that's why like I couldn't really ship them in this book, you know? Then we have Ori and Yeti from The Deep, and this is a female-female mermaid and human romance, and they're both separated from their own people and find togetherness with each other, and like that's fine. This is just a very short book that's like, you don't really have time to like love it, you know what I mean? So like I just feel like, okay, like sure, fine, okay, but like I'm not like, oh my god, because you don't really get a lot of time spent with them, because this is not the point of this book. Then we have Chloe and Nick from Not Like the Movies, which is an adult contemporary romance, and basically they work together, and they have worked together, and the main character of the first book, which I didn't read, writes like a movie about them, and them like kind of always liking each other but never making a move, and so then people are kind of like, you know, you should get together, and they're like, no, we're just friends and whatever. So she's insufferable as a character, and I don't say that often about female characters. She's insufferable, and they are kept apart for so long from her like absolute denial of feelings, when it's like so obvious that she has feelings and he has feelings, and like just get together already. But the thing that made them farther up on the list than they probably should have been based on that feeling alone is that he is perfect. He is one of my only like book boyfriends from this year. Like, I very frequently don't like, I might ship couples, but I don't typically want to like date the character. He's like one of the exceptions. I'm like, find me one of those. I like that. I would like one, please, for myself, please. So that's what bumped them up a little bit further on the list, close to the yay category. Then we have Red and Blue from This Is How You Lose the Time War, and this is a female-female romance between two characters who are on opposite sides of a time war, and they're writing like letters through time and space, kind of. And like, this is another one that I'm just like, sure, fine. I enjoy like the letters, but the plot of the story like doesn't stick with me at all. And like them sort of having this bond over time is really good, but again, you're kept more at a distance, I feel, in this story. Like you're not really with them because it's more like, again, these letters, and you have that emotion there, but not a connection otherwise, and you don't really like see them together because they're just writing to each other. So I didn't get the connection with them because of that. Then we have Elle and Orion from A Deadly Education. These are two that aren't really together in this book. Like you find out towards the end that like he did kind of have a crush on her, but she thought they were just friends, and like, and it's all fine. It's not in like a skeezy way. But the thing that made them like a little bit higher on this list is their potential, sort of like I mentioned with some other couples earlier, is that like he's a himbo and she's grumpy, and like that dynamic I really dig. So I hope that that works out and that they do kind of get together in that way, because like himbo guy with grumpy girl, like sure, yes, absolutely. Now we're getting into the meh yay category. We have Stasia and Berenice from Shorefall, and this is a female-female romance. It's established in book 1, and these two, like, I like them, but they don't pull at my heart. You know, like they're just fine. They're together, they're like stable. That's not the whole point of the plot. I dig them, cool, wonderful. But like, I'm not like, oh my god, about them or anything. And we have Tiffy and Leon from The Flatshare. This is similar to the like Time War thing in that this is an adult contemporary romance and we don't have that situation, but these are two people that are sharing a flat. She sleeps in it during the night and he sleeps in it during the day because of work schedules, and they end up kind of forming a relationship over like post-it notes and like letters that they leave for each other. So you don't really get to see them like together, and this is more contemporary than I would say it's a romance. So like, again, I didn't feel like pulled to them because I didn't like see them together. I didn't like see them interacting. It's just all these like post-its and stuff. But they're like cute and like supportive of each other as people and stuff once they start to like really know each other, but again, like no like feelings there for them. Then we have Shafali and Shizuka from The Warrior Moon and The Phoenix Empress. I read both this year. And these are still two warrior women in love, but they were much higher up on my list when I read the first book back in like 2017. So they still like love each other. They're also like a little bit codependent, which is why they're lower on the list. But they do grow out of that a bit. But like, they're obsessed with each other, and like I respect that. Like, you know, like, I don't, like, love it, but this is one of the only books I've ever read that is, like, an epic fantasy tale centered around two women who are, like, deeply in love with each other. So is it a bit codependent? Sure. Are they obsessed with each other? Yes. Am I okay with that, though, because this is, like, one of the only series that has that element to it? Sure. Then we have Chelsea and Jason from Paris Is Always a Good Idea. And this is a adult contemporary romance in which they are co-workers, and it's like rival co-workers to lovers. And the reason they're in like the like meh to yay category is like I kind of pulled for them, but like he has some moments where like he's a little bit possessive. I do believe there's like a fist fight at one point over her, which I never love. There's a couple of guys that have done that in some of these that I've forgotten to mention, but like I don't tend to love that. And he also like, he follows her. She's basically going around to Paris, Italy, and Ireland because before she started working, I think it was like before her mom died, she went on this trip and like found herself over the summer and fell in love with 3 different men over there. And so she was trying to like reignite her like spark for love and spark for life and whatever. And he sort of like follows her because of like a work thing, ends up like kind of trying to like ruin her trip, like trying to like talk her out of like seeing these guys and kind of being like, this is dumb. And like, I get why he's doing that, but I'm also like, that's a little bit schoolyard of you, isn't it? But they do end up bonding over some like shared experiences. And there is this like understanding throughout the story of eventually that she comes to of like, she needs someone that's good for her right now and not someone that's good for past her, which is what these other guys were. So like, I do kind of like that. But again, not high enough to be like, yay. Then we have Sabine and Bastian from The Bonecryer's Moon. This is one of those like fated star-crossed lovers destined to kill each other things. Like he needs to kill her for a reason, she needs to kill him because of a magical reason, and like then they start making googly eyes at each other. This is kind of angsty, but does feel a little bit more like younger YA, which is fine. Again, YA is written for younger people than me, but it does feel like slightly more mature, which is why I couldn't get super invested in it. And they like loved each other like a bit too quickly in my opinion. But again, like I do love a good like star-crossed lovers destined for each other but also destined to hurt each other kind of vibe, so I forget it. Then we have Navini and Dalinar from The Way of Kings, and this was just a dynamic that I liked because he is a man with like a pure soul and she is like a very cunning woman, and it's a very small subplot and like not an important point of the story at this point. But there is sort of like a second chance lovers dynamic here because I think they were like into each other before, but then she ended up marrying his brother or something who's like now dead. So it's like fine, I guess, like it's fine for me, like morally. But the one thing that gets me is like all he says is like how beautiful she is, and I'm like, okay, can you talk about like something else because she's also like really smart. So her being pretty is like not important. But also I feel like he's like a little bit himbo-y, so like it's whatever. We'll see how this goes. Then we have Cassiopeia and the death god. I think his name is like Hunkame. We pronounce that horribly and it's not gonna be in the synopsis. And this is the Death and the Maiden story, which I always dig, but I just wasn't super attached to them. I felt like more at a distance from the characters in general in this story, so I didn't get super attached to them in the way that I would have liked to. Crier and Ayla from Crier's War. This is a young adult science fiction and is a female-female romance between like basically magical androids. Like they're magically made, like alchemically made maybe, possibly. I'm forgetting, it's been a while. Androids. And the androids are in charge and the humans are not. Like they were the ones that were sort of overthrown. And that's what makes this more compelling. I think without that angle, it would be like just your basic kind of like YA story. One is trying to kill the other, blah, 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 overthrow like a regime, whatever. But with this element of the AI being like the ones in power, I think it makes it slightly more interesting. So this made it the higher side of the meh category. Then we have Zafira and Nasir from We Hunt the Flame. These were like kind of okay. I don't remember a lot about this, but in my notes I do say they both have like an affinity with darkness, which like love that. And they both feel that they like can't love. So these were like two broken beings who are going to like learn about love with each other, and I kind of dig that. This is a duology, I believe, so I do want to read the second book. Is it out yet? It might be, I don't know. Then we have Nadia and Malachiash from Ruthless Gods. These are two that are again kind of like the yay side of meh for me because I'm not super invested in them, and I do have like longer notes for these two because I just have like, thoughts the way that I do in my review for it. But I don't get all the hype around them. Like, they have a really big fandom. This is supposed to be like an enemies to lovers, true enemies to lovers, you know, monster boyfriend kind of thing. However, I'm like, okay, I love the fandom, like, depiction of them, but that's not really how they are in the book. There's a lot of tell instead of show. Like, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, she, like, hates him and, like, doesn't want to be with him and whatever. It's like No, you need to show the attraction and the like the pining and the angst in a way that you're just not. There are individual scenes with them that are so good and like so on point, but when it's woven into the entire story, it like doesn't really make sense and land for me. I want to like it, but it's not really a villain romance if the entire book you're trying to convince me that he's not actually a villain and he's really just a soft, anxious boy. Like, are you a villain romance or are you not? Either he's a big bad or he's just a soft boy. Like, come on. Like, I know there's gray area, but like, you gotta choose. If you want a villain romance, you gotta choose. So the wishy-washiness is what makes me not like this as much as I want to. I wish that I did. Then we have Alex and Henry from Red, White, and Royal Blue. These were two that were like fine for me. Cute, fine, very romantic. I'm sure all of you know, but this is an adult contemporary romance. It's a male-male romance between a fictional prince of England and a fictional son of the first female president of the United States. I mentioned this in my wrap-up for this book, but what got me was that like they're together for too much of the story for me. Like they get together like pretty quick. It's sort of supposed to be like a rivals / enemies to lovers, but they get together like pretty quick. And then they're just like together for most of the story, which is fine, but like I need some pining. I need some will they won't they. And I just don't have that. So I'm just like, okay, you're cute, but like I don't know if I care a ton, you know? Then we have Stacy and Daniel from Well Played. So this is complicated because this is adult contemporary romance and it's set around a catfishing plot. So basically this is set in a series where they're all part of like a Ren fair. So Stacy we meet in the first book and is one of the friends of the girl in the first book, and she has had like this fling with this guy who's part of a band. And so once he leaves for the summer that summer, she like messages him kind of drunkenly on like Facebook Messenger or something, and they start having this email relationship. Well, who she's actually messaging is his cousin, who she's always found very nice and very sweet, but they have never like been together. And so they form this relationship with her not knowing that it's him for like 70% of the book, maybe 60, like a pretty long time. And then you don't really see them together. Like most of the book is them spent like very separate, which I know I just bitched about, you know, like, well, not bitched, but like I said that I don't like seeing characters together like a ton as far as like being together. But these are couples, again, this like couples that communicate through just like writing messages doesn't work for me, is what I've learned as I've talked about all these couples. Any of these couples that I don't get to like physically see them like interacting, don't love it. So I pulled for them a little bit toward the end because he's just like very sweet and she's like a good character too, but like the catfishing plot and their relationship being formed mostly out of the Ren Fair, because I like the Ren Fair setting, and just mostly being through email like means I didn't connect to it as much as I maybe could have if it was more Ren Fair based. Then we have Wana Homan and Hanani from The Shadowed Sun. I don't really remember these two. I wrote in their information, but somehow the like little blurb that I wrote got lost. So I just know I was kind of like, okay. Like they were on, I think like two kind of slightly different sides of this like political situation. Like they were fine. I don't remember them, so that's why they're kind of in like the meh, whatever. Then we have Henrietta and Blackwood and Henrietta and Magnus from A Sorrow Fierce and Falling. This is the last book in the series, and this is a young adult fantasy series, and I talked about this in the like review for it, and that this book was like too rushed. Like this could have been like a 4-book series, because there's 2 like couples in here that are like together, and there just wasn't enough time. So I have like conflicting thoughts about like the ships in here. So I loved throughout the whole series Henrietta and Blackwood. In the first book, they had this almost like Pride and Prejudice dynamic, and then they have this like angsty dynamic and like kind of like will they, won't they, or this is gonna work out, blah, blah, blah. But then this last book, and very quickly because of how fast paced it was, because there wasn't enough time for everything, he turns to like basically borderline villainy, and it happens really quick. But it sucks because their bond, like before that happens, is like so good. Like their connection is just really immaculate. So I wish if that would have happened that they would have had more time to like dissolve that and like turn him sort of like to the dark side instead of it being like this quick sudden thing. And then she eventually does kind of like pair up with Magnus, who's a guy that she was with previously, but it was more of like a flirty thing, and he sort of like lied to her a bit and whatever. But I do like this a little bit too, because it shows like 2 people maturing and being wrong for each other at one time and right for each other in another. And I do think it was a good match in that way, but it was still too sudden. Like everything happened with Blackwood like very quickly, and then we're supposed to be like, oh, now her and Magnus are like a good match. And it's like those just both needed more time. Like there should have been the Blackwood thing in like a book 3 and a Magnus thing in like book 4, and there wasn't, and that makes me sad. But I still like liked it, but it was just like it became more meh because of the lack of time. Then we're getting into the yays. We have Elizabeth and Nathaniel from Sorcery of Florence, which is the first book that I read in 2020. I don't remember a lot about them, but I know that she's like a keeper of magical books that can like turn into actual monsters, and he's a sorcerer who are supposed to be kind of bad because they make deals with the devil or like demons or whatever. But what I like about them is that she is kind of like, basically the only note I wrote about them is that he says, "You absolute menace" to her. So she just like kind of causes chaos, and he's like a bisexual orderly sorcerer, and like I just kind of like that dynamic because it reminds me of like a low-key version, not as much, but like a low-key version of like the Dragon and Agnieszka if it was written into a YA story and not a main plot point, of just like, oh my god, you're a terror, but I love you. Like I kind of dig that, you know? Then we have Jude and Carden from The Queen of Nothing. I didn't like them as much as I liked them in the second book. I didn't like them in the first book like at all. I dug them kind of in the second book. I think I talked about them probably in my last year's wrap up. And then in this book, they just felt different. There was less banter and like more straight to trust for them, which I found like not really in line with their characters. Like there wasn't quite enough time in the series to develop that, but the fandom really is what put them a little bit higher into the yay category for me, because like the art and the imagery that you can pull from these scenes even is just like, is really good. Like I dig that. But them in this book, not so much. More like their overall arc from book 2 to 3 made it a little bit higher, but still another book where I just feel like there wasn't enough time for what we got. Then we have a whole slew of characters from Kingsbane by Claire Legrand. First we have Eliana and Simon, and this is the second book in a fantasy YA series with a lot of different characters in 2 different timelines and all this stuff. So Eliana is one of the main characters, and her and Simon have a thing, and I'm still not super into this. There's like an age gap thing that I think is like super weird, like squicky in a way, because it's an age gap that is like closer to realistic. There's another age gap situation that you could argue in this as well, but it's between like a supernatural creature, and I kind of forgive that. I know this is like a whole thing that people talk about in fantasy a lot. I'm like kind of okay with that sometimes, but when it's like, oh, he's like in his like 20s and you're like a teen, ick. I think it's like 6-ish years. I'm just like, not at your ages, no. Then we have Riel and Audric, and Riel is one of the other characters in a different timeline. And these two are like, again, like kind of fine. They're kind of meh of all of them on here. So like actually we kind of have like a nay, meh, and like kind of yay in this range. But those two, like, Audric just seems kind of dumb sometimes, bless his heart. And I also don't know why he puts up with Riel so much in this book. Like, Riel is just doing the most in this book, and he just like puts up with her. I'm kind of like, why? And then we have Riel and Corian, and this is a really interesting like main character and villain dynamic. And Corian and Riel are like toxic but intriguing. So that's why they're kind of like a yay. Like it's definitely like, oh, this is not like a good situation, but like it's interesting and this like call to power and like call to darkness, and it's kind of taking this character who's supposed to be like a symbol of good and like turning her to the dark side kind of. So like that I kind of just dig for those vibes, you know, but it's not like a good thing, you know, but that's kind of the mix that we have with all the couples here. Then we have Violet and Isaac and Justin and Harper from The Devouring Grey. So no one is actually together in this, but there are some like implications for people getting together. I think two of them were previously together. I think Justin and Harper, I want to say, were like previously together, and it's kind of like, oh, are they going to have this like star-crossed thing? Because due to their like magic, this is a like contemporary fantasy YA. So due to their like magic, because they're both from founding families, so they're not really supposed to be together, and like, meh. But what I really dug was Violet and Isaac. There are implications that they might get together, and both of them are like kind of damaged and relate to each other in that way, and they're both bisexual. So I'm like, these two disaster bis getting together, like I really kind of want that. So that has me intrigued and makes me want to finish the series. It's a duology. Then we have a whole handful of couples from Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. The only reason I read this book was for the couples. So we have James and Cordelia, and those are the two that I'm most invested in of the series. They get like sort of like fake married. So like I kind of dig that. There's like there's this dynamic, and there's like some magical things keeping them apart, and I'm kind of into it. Then we have Lucy and Jesse. I'm intrigued about it, but Jesse's actually dead. So Jesse's a ghost. We know this like pretty much from the beginning, I think. Again, I told you guys there might be spoilers in here. But yeah, he's dead. So even though there's like a thing there, I'm like, until he's alive again, I don't know what we're gonna do here. Then there's kind of an age gap because he's been dead since he was like a little bit closer to her age, but like, I don't know. Then we have Anna and Ariadne, and these are a side couple because neither of them are main characters, but I still wanted to mention it because it's female, and like Anna's great. We barely got to see them, but Anna is a queen, so that's kind of why I wanted to mention them. Then we have Thomas and Alistair. This is a male-male romance, and these two are two that we also didn't get really to see much of, and Alistair has some like redemption to do, but again, I could be like into it. Like all these I'm like, ooh, it's like a soap opera. I love to see it. Then we have Celine and Bastian from The Beautiful and the Damned. What I like about them is these are two very strong characters that are drawn to each other's strengths as well, so I feel like they make a good like power couple. This is a young adult like historical paranormal series. I think it's gonna be like 4 books set in New Orleans. There's vampires eventually in book 2, really. I do like that there are some discussions of consent in here too. Like there's a steamy makeout scene, and like the consent is very like on page deliberate, which is really good. And they're being like kept apart by outside forces and things throughout. I liked them, but I wasn't like clutching my chest over them. And the second book, they're like slightly more dramatic, and I'm like, for what? So we'll see if that comes back around to where I start liking them again even more in book 3. Then we have Arwa and Zahir from Realm of Ash. The first book in this companion series, Empire of Sand, had one of my, I think my favorite couple from last year. So these two are slightly down farther on the list, but I remembered the quote, the mystic order of 2. This is a adult desert-based romance, and these two are kind of working together, and they're two very like smart people. Like Zahir's very like bookish and like studied, and like there's this like magical stuff going on, and they have a much quieter romance than the characters in the first book. So I didn't enjoy them quite as much, but like it's still like a quiet, stable partnership in that way. Then we have Gavin and Karis from the Black Prism. These are two that we also didn't get to see much of because there's only some like implications and like second chance stuff and whatever. But again, I'm intrigued about the future of this. The angst is definitely there. They're like ripped apart by external forces and circumstances, but they're actually in love. So I think there's like a chance there for like a second chance romance thing that's gonna be like kind of complicated. So dig that. And I know it's a long series, so I'm like, ooh, is it gonna be like pining for multiple books? Like, let's see. We have Tessa and Eun G from Heart of Soul. This is a adult contemporary romance between a K-pop idol and a fan, but like in a way that doesn't make the power dynamic super icky. There's lots of consent in here, like lots of on-page consent. Like there's even a scene where there's some like drunken stuff starting up, and they had already had sex like earlier, and still the character was like, no, because you can't consent when you're drunk. Like it was very blatant on page, which was nice. And they're very much like a comfort couple, and so they're very sweet in that way. There is some stuff about the story that gets a little bit like dramatic, but not so much with them, so I really dug their like comfort of each other. It was very sweet. And also both of them are on the LGBTQ+ spectrum, part of the Alphabet Mafia, so love that. Then we have Lena and Max from The Worst Best Man. This is another adult contemporary romance, and these are two that like, oh, I wasn't sure at first because he was the brother of her ex-fiance, but it's been like years, and her ex-fiance were actually like not compatible at all, and then her and the brother, Max, have to work together on like a business thing, and she's like a wedding planner, and it's like this whole thing. But like the way they grow together is like super good. They opened up to each other. It's like hate to love, but not too much miscommunication there. Less drama and stuff. And then another thing that really got me that I wrote a note about was like there's some awkwardness in the sex scenes. So a lot of people say how like sometimes sex scenes are so like unrealistic. Like I think there's a part where like he can't get his pants off and he's like tripping. I think this might be the... I don't think this is a book where someone broke a table, but I've read a number of books this year that are adult contemporary that like have very realistic sex scenes, like people not being able to get shirts off and like just stuff like that. So always like to see that. Then we have Alexis and Noah from Crazy Stupid Bromance, so the third book in the Bromance book club series. So again, adult contemporary romance. And this one was better than the second book, obviously, since it's higher on the list. This was actually a Friends to Lovers that I liked because they became friends like about a year and a half before the book starts, maybe only a year, and became like good friends as adults. And they're both like blatantly into each other, but the other one doesn't like really realize it, but everyone else knows. And so it's that kind of friendship to lovers thing, which I dig. And they're also like very affectionate and supportive of each other as friends. And reading that in 2020, I'm like, man, I wish I had a friend that like quarantined as much as I did and we could just like cuddle, you know, maybe fall in love. I don't know. Also, she's like a happy ray of sunshine and he's a grump. And I love that dynamic. She also runs a cat cafe. Like it's very cute. I like it. Then we have Chloe and Red from Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This is an adult contemporary romance, and these are two people who are just like a happy, healthy couple, and they work on themselves, both for themselves and for each other, to be like a good partner. Like it's really good and really healthy. They're really thoughtful of each other, and there is like this thread within the story of like knowing that relationships do take work, but that there's a lot of hope there, so I dug that. Then we have right after it the next book in the series, which is Danny and Zaf from Take a Hint, Danny Brown. These are slightly higher than the last ones because I just loved Danny so much and related to her. She's a plus size bi black witch, and he is a Muslim ex-rugby player. So like, I am also a bi witch. This is a vibe I enjoyed. They were very cute. I think this was the romance book that I read that had them breaking a table while having sex, so love that. And it wasn't like in a like, ooh, it's so sexy they broke the table. It's like, ooh, we fell. So love that. Then we have Amor and Bastin from All the Stars and Teeth. This was a very bantery relationship that went into something deeper and evolved into something deeper. This is the first book in a YA fantasy duology that is taking place in like sort of an island area, and he's like a pirate or a privateer that has to take her as the princess to like all these different places, and they kind of form this dynamic. So I really was into that, and this could have been like a very basic YA relationship, and I found that it wasn't. They don't get bogged down in petty miscommunications the way that a lot of romances do, both in adult and YA, but especially in YA I find that's more common. And they're very trusting and mature. So really liked to see them, and I do want to read book 2 in this as well because of them. Then we have Marcus and April from Spoiler Alert, and this is an adult contemporary romance that is basically inspired by the Brienne and Jaime fandom of Game of Thrones. This is definitely like comfort fiction for that. This is not them, but basically he is an actor in the that kind of fandom for the show that he's on. But he also writes fan fiction, and she writes fan fiction, and they're like fanfiction friends but don't know each other. Well, she ends up posting a cosplay of herself, and she's a bigger woman, on Twitter, and she gets like attacked. So he, not knowing that it's her, asks her on a date to be like, screw you guys are awful. And then they end up like bonding there, and then he ends up figuring out that it's her from like the fandom and whatever. So they were very cute, loved their dynamic. Again, it's sort of like a himbo with like a bigger plus size woman and then like fandom stuff. Like has a lot of elements I really loved. Some of their own stuff overshadowed the relationship ultimately, but I still really liked them. Then we have a few different couples from the Silvered Serpents. We have Severin and Layla, who were definitely at the top of this list from the first book when that came out probably like 2 years ago. There was a lot of angst here. Love the angst in these books, but I do think that I liked the angst more in book 1. I was expecting more angst than I got in book 2. Mostly because in this book, Severin is very like conceal, don't feel like the whole time. Then we have sort of this like love triangle dynamic going on, which was hinted in book 1, between Tristan, Hypnos, and Zofia. I love Tristan and Zofia. So sweet, so cute. Much more of like a long-term couple. But I also liked Tristan and Hypnos because I feel like they really understood each other, and even though their dynamic was very much more like short-term and like they both kind of understood that, I liked that they found some like solace within each other for the time being. So I kind of dug the whole thing. Then we have Nahri and Dara from City of Brass. In my notes I was like, question mark, question mark, question mark, I don't know how to feel. So I really dug this. This is the first book in an adult fantasy, desert base set in like a like 18th century Cairo, I think, but basically our main character makes a deal accidentally sort of and like summons a jinn, a warrior jinn, and then it gets taken away to the city of like the jinn and the deva and everything. And I really dug their dynamic. It's sort of like she almost has like this princess and the guard dynamic going on with them. and I love a whole like guard romance. But then he gets like very possessive and controlling at one point for like different political reasons, and I didn't dig that. So I don't know how I'm gonna feel. We'll see how I feel throughout the rest of the series, but like, oh, I don't know. But like there's pining and there's like angst and there's like things keeping them apart, but like then he did that douchey thing. I don't know, we'll have to see with the rest of the series. Then we have Darcy and Elle from Written in the Stars, and this is a female-female romance that's Pride and Prejudice inspired, kind of. And these are two women who were set up on a date by like a mutual friend. One's the sister of the guy and one's like a coworker almost. And there's like a lot of miscommunication and like shitty kind of Darcy behavior, like Pride and Prejudice Darcy behavior, but then they eventually end up like falling in love, and Darcy is more of like a straight-laced like businesswoman and the other character is like a astrologer. It's great. It's very sweet. I really liked it. Yes. Then we have Gideon and Harrow from Gideon the Ninth. This is a female-female romance between necromancers, basically. This is a adult fantasy sci-fi kind of thing. Everyone's a necromancer, and these have been like sworn enemies for so long that they end up in a situation together and kind of have to team up. So they're enemies to almost lovers that continue to banter the whole time, which you would think would be kind of unbelievable, but it actually feels believable, even though it's extreme, because they're both broken. So are they quite lovers? No, but there's like something, and I don't know how the rest of this is gonna play out, but like, ugh. So dug that, dug the ladies. Then we have Shiala and Serapio from Black Sun. They are not a main plot point in the story. They are two of the main characters, but it's two outcast people in a magical like society. This is like Native American inspired folklore. I think pre-colonialism is like the setting that it's inspired by, but these are two characters who have like both very extreme powers that other people don't trust, and they find each other and like find comfort in each other, and it's very sweet. Really like it. Then we have Penelope and Born from A Rogue by Any Other Name. This is a historical fiction, adult historical fiction, that is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and I dug it. I did. This was good. This was my only historical fiction that I've ever read, but I'm thinking about continuing this whole series. This is a second chance lovers scenario as well, because they were friends in childhood, knew each other. He was like a highborn man, she was like a highborn lady. She's now been like deemed a spinster, even though she's what, in their like maybe late 20s or whatever. And he lost his fortune in a gambling situation, and now he owns like a gambling den, which is like hell, you know, you see this. And he ends up sort of like stealing her away, sort of like a fake married type thing, but then end up being like really in love. It's really good. The reason this isn't slightly higher is because he does have a bit of like an aggressive streak, not with her, but like I think this happens a lot in historicals where it's like he's defending her honor, there's like fist fights, he gets in fist fights, blah blah blah, he can't feel his feelings, so he's going to box someone, and it's like, nah, don't need that. But overall, as a Hades Persephone thing, dug it. Then we have two couples from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. We have Addy and Henry and Addy and Luke, and what I liked about both of them is that it shows different like depictions of love, kind of, and like what is love and some of these things. So they're two very different dynamics. Addy and Henry are more like perfect for each other due to the situation. There's a lot of lines, again, that don't make it like insta-love. You know, they're the two perfect people for each other due to the like curses that they're under. And then Addy and Luke are very toxic, but again, it's depicted in the story, so I don't feel like it's icky. Like the story, the narration says like how toxic it is. And there are two people who are like the only two people that really truly know each other, again, because of their situations. And like that's really compelling as well. So it's two very like compelling dynamics for different reasons. Then we also have multiple situations, but mostly just one, from God's Grave and Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff. These are the second and third book from the Nevernight series, which is a adult grimdark series about assassins. This is the beginning of the love category, the all caps love category, the very top. So firstly, we have Mia and Ash. And I know a lot of people don't like Mia and Ash. Like, I get that. I get that in my discussion videos it's been very, like, polarized about it. But, like, I love them. I put in all caps, this is the female-female angsty dynamic that I've always wanted. There's a lot of stuff between them. And, like, neither person is, like, a very good... I would say Ash is a worse person than Mia is. But, like, ooh, do they kind of, like, get each other. And, like, there's this attraction even though, like... Mia especially kind of doesn't want there to be and is like, wow, Ash, you like betrayed people, and but like it makes sense why, and it's just a lot there, which I really liked. And then in the third book, we have Trick back in the mix. Again, I told you there's spoilers in here. Who was her love interest in the first book and who Ash actually killed. So like this whole dynamic is like very interesting, and I do love that like Trick pulled his way back from death because he loved her so much, but then ultimately ended up like sort of sacrificing himself, I guess you could say, because he knew she'd be happier at this point with Ash. And some people don't like that because they're like, oh, like Trick got screwed over and blah blah blah, but like that was all something that he chose, and it was very like wonderful and like complicated, and there was a sapphic happy ending, and like I loved it. I love this whole dynamic with everybody. Like everyone loves each other in a way, and like, like I really enjoyed. These are pretty much now, but including those, like all books that were in my favorite book list, so you shouldn't be shocked by any of these. We have Thea and Gavin from the Bromance book club. Again, I read all 3 of the books that are out so far, and this one was the one that was at the top of the list. These are like a second chance romance. These are a married couple, and they are about to get divorced because of like a misunderstanding. You know, she feels like they've grown apart. There's like not a lot of intimacy there. He's still like very much in love with her, so he gets pulled into the Bromance book club to learn how to like kind of win her back. What I really love about them is there's a lot of love there. They really back each other up, and there's like a lot of vulnerability and just growth with each other, and just kind of showing that like, yes, 2 people can make it work. And I just like loved that. I love a good second chance romance, and the fact that these people were still together, like, ooh, I really enjoyed it. Then we have Emily and Simon from Well Met, and this is like a, you know, rivals to lovers romance set in a Ren Fair, adult contemporary romance. These 2, the banter is excellent. So these are 2 people who don't get along in like the real world setting, you know, like as people they haven't got along, they've kind of butt heads. She's more of a carefree person, Simon is more like a straight-laced person and is in charge of the Ren Fair, and they just butt heads. But then when they get to the Ren Fair and she is the bar wench and he plays a pirate, their characters like each other and flirt. And like that's how they end up starting to like kind of get together. It's so good. This is one of the best sex scenes I've ever read as well, which I think I talked about in my favorites video, because the writing flows the exact same and doesn't turn into like, now it's sex scene writing. This does go a bit downhill in the end, because there's this like big communication thing that happens, like drama thing that happens, that is like so unnecessary that I'm still mad about, because that kept this book from being like a 5-star book. It was like a 4.5 or like 4.75. But anyway, there's this miscommunication thing that's dumb and very out of character, but otherwise I still loved this. And I still think about it. And if I read it again, which I will at some point, I'll just skip that part like it never happened. Then the number 2 slot, we have January and Gus from Beach Read. These 2 are fantastic. Another adult contemporary romance, another rivals to lovers. I love to see it. These 2 knew each other in college as like writing rivals. She is now a romance author, he is a literary fiction author, and they meet up again because after her father dies, she goes to his beach house that he had been sharing with a mistress that no one knew about, and is like unpacking her grief and stuff. And then he is next door, Gus, and they end up like sort of reconnecting, bantering a bit, and then challenging each other to write a book in the other one's genre. So good. Like I said, rivals to lovers. Also sort of like a second chance lovers dynamic, because they had this like moment in college that was like misunderstood. Like I think what it was, I'm forgetting a little bit, but I think they like were at a party in college and like slow dance at a frat house or something, and it like we're grinding in the basement or something, and then it was like a misunderstanding about it. Oh my god. So loved that whole thing. And then they had this like second chance, and like he's always been into her and she like never knew it. She thought that he hated her. Oh, love. So they just form this bond based on like a deep understanding of each other. They are getting over pain together, and they each have like separate traumas that they're getting over like together but separately. Really love it. Very supportive. Awesome. And there is some drama within this, but like it's not contrived. Like it all very much makes sense. So good. The best adult contemporary romance I read all year. And last but not least, you knew it was gonna be, we have Vasya and Morozko from The Winter of the Witch. I have so many notes written down, like quotes from the book. All I wrote at very first was OTP in all caps. These are supportive equals of each other. This is the last book in an adult fantasy romance, and these 2 characters have known each other for quite some time, and she is a magical woman that's kind of the bond between the magical world of this Eastern European setting, and he is like a god of winter and death and like frost. He's like a frost demon. There's so many good lines that I wrote down. There's one that's where she's like, never give me orders, and he's like, command me then. Then there's another line, because these are 2 characters who have been like mostly alone and like outcast, and it's like, you're not alone anymore. And the other one's like, I know, neither are you. And she's so sassy to him. Like one of the lines I wrote down is like, I'm allowed to want things, Winter King. She wants him. And there's a line at the end that is, you have your realm and I have mine. Maybe we'll forge one together. Ugh. And she like asks him like, what will we gain? And he's like, a future. There are so many lines in here. I cannot. I mean, I know some of these out of context are going to be like, what? But I hope you know like how angsty and just perfect this is. Again, because these characters have been built from the very first book. Oh, so good. Like the bond there is so immaculate, and they're equals. They're powerful, a powerful partnership of equals. Also, as a little aside, as a little spice and a little sprinkle, the other couple in here, which is the monk and the bear. What is their name? Constantine and... forget the bear's name actually. He's a god. He's like the god of like summer and death, sort of also. No, chaos. He's a god of chaos. But there's a dynamic there as well that is so good, and it's like gay angst where like the bear loved him in his own way, and it's just like, it's so good. So yeah, super dig that. I've been going so long that my heat's turned on, even though I turned the heat off to do this video, so you wouldn't hear that in the background, so I apologize. It's below 65 in my house now, so I have to let that keep going. But those were all the couples that I read about in 2020. So comment below, let me know how some of your favorite couples and least favorite couples ranked. Let me know if you find this helpful. Again, I think having the notes helped this to be more clear, but if you would like me to include more stuff, I guess I could, but then this video would be, I mean, this video is already gonna be like an hour long. Like, I've been filming this for like at least an hour. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. So comment below, let me know your thoughts about all the couples that you read about and the couples that I read about in 2020. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.